In the shadows of America's most infamous crimes, some cases never truly fade. They wait. For nearly half a century, one name has lingered over an unsolved 1974 murder, whispered in court records, hinted at in confessions, and debated by investigators ever since. A teenage girl, a brutal loss, and a suspect who would become one of the most notorious killers in U.S. history. But only now, decades later, modern forensic science is giving investigators a clearer picture of what really happened. And what they are finding is reopening a chapter many thought was already closed. The case centers on 17-year-old Laura Ann Aime, whose life was cut short in 1974. At the time, America was still years away from understanding the full scale of serial killer activity that would later define the 1970s crime landscape. And among the names that would eventually dominate that history is Ted Bundy, a man whose crimes shocked the nation and whose charm masked a deeply violent pattern of behavior. Bundy was executed in 1989, but even after his death, questions remained, because he had confessed not just to known victims, but to many others that were never fully verified. And one of those names often linked to his confessions was Laura Ann Aime. For decades, the case remained officially unsolved, locked in the limitations of its time. In 1974, Laura Ann Aime was reported missing under circumstances that raised immediate concern. Her disappearance became part of a broader wave of missing persons cases during a period when investigative coordination across states was limited and forensic science was still in its early stages. At that time, DNA profiling did not exist. Crime scene preservation standards were inconsistent. Cross-state suspect tracking was minimal. Investigators worked with what they had: witness statements, fragmented timelines, and limited physical evidence. But none of it led to a definitive resolution. As years passed, the case grew colder. Meanwhile, Ted Bundy continued his crimes across multiple states before being captured in 1978. During interviews and final confessions before his execution, Bundy hinted at additional victims beyond those confirmed. Some of those admissions included references that investigators later tried to match with unsolved cases from the same era. Laura Ann Aime's name surfaced in that broader investigative review, but without the forensic tools needed to confirm anything conclusively. So the case remained officially unresolved, but never forgotten. Decades later, the story took a new turn. Cold case investigators began revisiting old files connected to unresolved 1970s disappearances, including Laura Ann Aime's case. This time, however, they had something investigators in 1974 did not: modern DNA technology and advanced forensic reanalysis methods. Preserved case materials, such as archived evidence, clothing fragments, and documentation from the original investigation, were re-examined under updated forensic protocols. Instead of relying solely on witness statements or confessions, investigators could now focus on biological traces that were previously undetectable. The goal was not to rewrite history, but to test whether modern science could bring clarity to long-standing uncertainty. What emerged was not a dramatic courtroom reversal or a new trial, but something more subtle, yet powerful: a forensic reaffirmation that strengthened the historical linkage between Bundy's known movements, his documented confessions, and the circumstances surrounding Laura Ann Aime's case. In other words, science did not invent a new truth, it sharpened an old one. And for investigators, that distinction matters. Before his execution in 1989, Ted Bundy made a series of confessions in an attempt to delay his sentence. While some confessions were verified, others remained uncertain or partially corroborated. This created a long-standing challenge for investigators. How much of what Bundy said could be independently confirmed? Historically, authorities treated many of his additional claims with caution. Bundy was known to manipulate information, sometimes mixing truth with deception. That is why cases like Laura Ann Aime's remained in a gray zone for decades. However, modern forensic science has changed the way investigators evaluate such statements. Today, confessions are not treated as final proof on their own. Instead, they are cross-referenced with physical evidence, geographic patterns, timeline consistency, biological verification when available. This layered approach allows cold case teams to revisit old confessions with new precision, and in this case, it helped bring renewed clarity to a case that had remained unresolved for nearly 50 years. Behind every cold case is a family that never stopped remembering. For Laura Ann Aime's loved ones, the passage of time did not erase the loss. It only deepened the silence around it. Cold case reviews like this reopen old emotional wounds, but they also offer something equally powerful: acknowledgement. Even without dramatic courtroom proceedings, the reaffirmation of investigative findings brings a form of closure that was previously out of reach. Public reaction to these developments has been mixed but significant. Many see it as proof that justice does not always expire with time. Instead, it evolves, driven by technology, persistence, and the refusal of investigators to let cases disappear into history. This case is part of a much larger shift in modern criminal justice. Across the United States, cold case units are revisiting decades-old investigations using advanced DNA sequencing, forensic genealogy, and digital reconstruction techniques. Cases once thought permanently unsolved are now being reopened, and in many instances, resolved. What makes this important is not just the science itself, but what it represents. Time does not erase evidence. Technology can outgrow limitations of the past, and justice can be delayed without being denied. Even cases linked to historical figures like Ted Bundy are being re-evaluated under this new forensic lens. But investigators are careful, because while science can strengthen conclusions, it must never replace verified facts with assumptions. That balance is what defines modern cold case work. The story of Laura Ann Aime is not just about one investigation. It is about how time reshapes truth. In 1974, investigators worked with limited tools and unanswered questions. Decades later, those same questions are being revisited with science that can detect what was once invisible. And while not every detail is rewritten, the picture becomes clearer, piece by piece. In the end, cases like this remind us that justice is not always immediate. Sometimes it waits in archives, in evidence rooms, and in memories, until the moment science catches up. And when it does, even the oldest cases can speak again. If you're drawn to the truth behind the headlines, you're in the right place. This is CSV, Crime Story Vault. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you never miss a new case. If this story moved you, disturbed you, or made you think, hit like and leave a comment below. And for exclusive updates, behind-the-scenes content, and more real crime stories, follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok at Crime Story Vault 25. Until next time, stay curious, stay aware, and keep the vault open.